Westmoreland Community Connections is a presentation of Citizens Fiber.
Welcome to Westmoreland Community Connections, a look at issues and happenings on Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB. Here now is your host, Jennifer Miele, Chief Communications Officer and Managing Director of Evangelization of the Diocese of Greensburg.
Hello and welcome to Westmoreland Community Connections on WHJB. I'm your host, Jennifer Miele, Chief Communications Officer for the Diocese of Greensburg. Honored to be your host today because I get to have the opportunity to present so many important topics, things that our community needs to know about. And one of those topics today is about State Representative Mike Reese. Mike Reese was a wonderful man, a wonderful husband, father, and servant to his community. And he was tragically taken earlier this year. And we wanted to take the time to invite some individuals who worked closely with him, who formed bonds with him so that we could remember the best parts of Representative Mike Reese. And the first person joining me today is Senator Pat Stefano. Senator Stefano, thank you so much for being with us. And thank you for taking the time to share some memories about Representative Reese. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about your relationship with him and what you want people at home to know.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate you putting this together in memory of Mike. I think of him as from the first day we met, whenever I was just newly elected. So we're talking about 2014. He'd already been in office before me. But I always like to quote Billy Joel whenever I can. And this time that really fits when he was singing one of his songs, Only the Good Die Young. Mm-hmm. And that so much fits Mike because he was larger than life. And I remember just meeting him for the first time and I'm just still learning my way around. And his comment, he would bow down a little bit and say, "You're in the upper chamber. I'm in the lower chamber." And I said, "Well, Mike, I don't see it that way. I see us, you're on one side of the building, I'm on the other. That's how that works." But he was always so full of life, so full of smiles. And anytime we were working on any of the legislation, especially when we were talking about some of the school work that he was doing in school choice, he was very passionate, but always willing to listen, and that big smile that he had. But that sense of humbleness that he had, as I mentioned that story, is when he always would come up to me. And he would still do that up until just a few months ago. I'd see him in the hallways and he'd do that same thing. I said, "Stop doing that, Mike. We're teammates. We work together." And I think just summing that up is his life, the way he was, just larger than life, full of life and big smiles. We're really going to miss him, working with him. He covered part of my district up in Somerset County in Jennerstown area. So I always enjoyed working with him. He and I were very passionate when it came to Jennerstown Speedway and the issues we worked there. So indeed, thank you for putting this together. God bless his family as they get through this most difficult time. Thank you.
It's a difficult time for them. And I'm sure that this brings some solace that you're able to come on and share some of those memories for him and what he did for the community. And just one more question about the kind of man he was, because, he took on some big battles. He was a young guy. He was not afraid to take on those battles. And tell us about his personality when it came to that.
Well, you knew when Mike was in the room because he had a brightness about him. And even the heavy subjects that we used to deal with, and there'd be anger everywhere. Mike was willing to listen. And always there with a smile and say, "We'll figure this out. We'll work it out." And he was never afraid to take on these big issues. And as you can see, he worked his way into leadership of the House, and he was respected by his peers. I think that just sums everything up.
He really was a special guy. And I'm so thankful, Senator Stefano, for you jumping on today to talk to us a little bit about Representative Mike Reese, who we lost much too young earlier this year. In fact, after his battle with COVID-19, had made a recovery, was back, was exercising, was very engaged and healthy. Another person who worked very closely with Representative Mike Reese was Jordan Fry. He joins us on the line right now. You did a lot of policy work, communications work with Representative Reese. I'm sure this was very difficult news for you to hear. Tell us, Jordan, when you got the news, what was your reaction, and share some memories about him with us.
So my reaction was just absolutely devastating, almost disbelief. I sat with the family for a long while, and just watching the family rally around one another. They're very strong people. I've known the Reeses for many years. They've opened me in their homes, and I've got to witness them at their high points and their low points. And this is certainly one of their low points, but they are extremely strong and they're rallying around one another. But to go back to your original question, my initial response was just absolutely devastating. It was devastating for the family. I was devastating for myself. Mike was not only my boss for 12 years, but my friend for close to 20. We got to know one another very personally. And he was a real easy guy to work for because of that. Because you knew where he was coming from, you knew what he wanted from you, you knew what his long-term objectives were, and ultimately this is a hit for the community. I mean, look, he would tell you, look, there's a lot of good people out there that want to do this work, and there's also a lot of people that would make it just about them. But that wasn't Mike. Mike was never in it just for himself, and you knew that when you witnessed how hard that he was going to work in order to accomplish all his goals. So
Jordan, when you heard the news about him passing away, he had survived COVID-19. He was actually doing really well, really energetic and athletic as he always was. And, not sure the final cause of death, which I believe the newspaper reported as some sort of brain aneurysm. But the reality is he was on the front lines of the COVID-19 battle this entire time. To be an elected official, to worry about taking care of your community, but also to balance the ability for small businesses to survive.
Mike was never satisfied with just saying, oh, okay, well, PennDOT says it has to be this way, so we're just going to do that. He was always pushing the envelope a little bit, not in a bad way or confrontive way, but he would bring PennDOT out to a location where maybe a constituent wasn't thrilled with the way that something was going, and he would say, "All right, listen, I just want to review this with you. Show me, what your long-term objectives are here with this project, PennDOT." And there were times that we're walking up and down the side of the road. Sometimes he just got out of the car after a day in Harrisburg. He's still in a suit. He's still in the tie. He would have taken the tie and the jacket off, but it was 20 degrees. Wind is blowing snow sideways, and we're walking up and down the side of the road for a quarter of a mile, looking at this with Penn. Okay, if there's a storm drain here, why aren't we taking care of this first before we install a new one and opening it up right in this guy's yard? And Mike would often get calls. What were you doing on the side of the road? I almost hit you. And be like, well, I had work to do. That was always the way that Mike could remember. Everything that Senator Spano said was spot on. But I would just add that he was a worker. He wanted to get into the nuts and bolts, not just in constituent issues, but in legislation that required good communication. And it required establishing relationships, which is what made him so friendly.
And you'll miss him, I'm sure. Very
much so. Very much so.
I am very thankful that you joined us today, Jordan Fry, a longtime colleague and confidant of Representative Mike Reese, who passed away earlier this year. Thanks for being with us here, Jordan. You're listening.
Thank you for having me.
To Community Connections on WHJB in Greensburg. Today, we're talking about the memory and the legacy of State Representative Mike Reese, who passed away earlier this year. I'm really honored to have County Commissioner Gina Cerilli on the call this morning. She was on the other side of the political aisle, but certainly didn't stop her from working together with Representative Mike Reese on a lot of critical issues. Commissioner Cerilli, thank you so much for joining the show today, and we'd love to hear about your memories and your interactions with Representative Reese.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be able to be involved and to talk about Mike. Mike was one of the first state representatives representatives I met back in 2015. And like you said, I'm one of the lone Democrats here in Westmoreland County, but Mike was bipartisan. He didn't treat me as the Democrat. We worked together. He didn't care if somebody was Republican or Democrat. He only cared about the people. And as Jordan said, there's a lot of politicians that go to Harrisburg and they want to make a big name for themselves because Harrisburg is when all the important work gets done. However, and Mike did make a very big name for himself in Harrisburg, but what he cared about more was the constituents back here in Westmoreland County. Anytime a constituent called me from his district, I would immediately reach out to Mike, reach out to his office, give him a text message. He would respond almost immediately, follow up with that constituent, and then get back to me to let me know if they worked out the problem and the solution that they came up with. So yes, he was all about going to Harrisburg and he made a big name for himself there. But what was more important to him was the constituents here in Westmoreland County. And like the senator said, when you're in a room with Mike, you knew Mike was in the room. He was always laughing, always smiling, always in a good mood. And he put everyone at ease, anybody that he talked to. And he will be somebody that will definitely be missed. My prayers and my thoughts go out to his family, his wife, his kids, his parents, his siblings, everybody in the Reese family. He is definitely someone that has been gone way too soon.
I'm sure you were probably just as in shock as the other individuals on this call today. On with us right now is Jordan Fry, a longtime constituent and really co-worker, worked alongside Representative Reese with policy and communication. We have Senator Pat Stefano, who was sort of a junior legislator to Mike Reese, and they, sort of came up and coming together in their political careers. And of course, Commissioner Gina Cerilli, who's on the line now. The shock of this and how frightening and how fragile life can be, I'm sure was very devastating, because I know that, again, he opened that dialogue with you. He was not a confrontational guy. He was a dialogue guy. And I'm sure you'll miss that.
Absolutely. And I will not be able to eat a Reese's peanut butter cup again without thinking of Mike. So every time I get that Reese's, I'll smile and think of Mike.
So you guys had that little inside joke. I'm sure lots of people did with Representative Mike Reese. Commissioner Cerilli, thank you so much for joining us on the call today. Our next guest is Representative Eric Nelson. He is on the call today. I invited him to come on and talk to us a little bit about his interactions and his memories with Representative Mike Reese. Representative Nelson, thanks for joining us. And, tell us about your reaction when you heard about this.
Hi, Jen. It's really nice that you're doing this today. I just wanted to take a moment and thank you. It's kind of tough at times to go, head back down that memory lane. But I remember it was about mid-morning, the start of that very, very bad and sad day. And it was one of those, we were surprised, trying to get the facts in. I reached out to one of Mike's uncles, because I think that's a key element of Mike, his family and the tight family. And I used to tease him about the patch that he lived on, because it was surrounded with family members in every direction. We tried to sort through both the facts, the response, the misinformation. It was one of those numb mornings that just kept spiraling downward, but fortunately, Mike and his kids, his wife, they had an enormous amount of family that was there, and Excella did a first-class job of both the whole process of everything. So not a good day at all, but it's nice to be able to have a community and a family, so that Angela and the kids were never alone through that whole time. I mean, Jordan was right there. Father Paul came from St. Vincent's. The whole community really reacted the way that we want a community to do when you have a sudden loss of such a wonderful guy.
You're listening to Westmoreland Community Connections on WHJB. We'll be right back.
This is Westmoreland Community Connections on Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB. If you have a suggestion for a topic, or if your nonprofit organization would like to be featured on this program, call us during regular business hours at 724-216-1200.
Westmoreland Community Connections is a presentation of Citizens Fiber.
Welcome back to Westmoreland Community Connections on WHJB. I'm your host, Jennifer Miele, and have a very important topic to talk about today, and that is the memory of State Representative Mike Reese, who passed away of a suspected brain aneurysm earlier this year. And on the line with me now to discuss the importance of his memory and his legacy are Jason Rigoni. He's the Executive Director for the County Industrial Development Corporation and Director for Westmoreland County's Department of Planning and Development. Also on the line with me now is Jim Smith, who is the President and CEO of the Economic Growth Connection. You guys are two of my favorite guys, and I really appreciate you being on here today, talking about the memory and legacy of Mike Reese. So we'll start with you, Jason. Tell me about your partnership and your work with Mike Reese and what you'll miss about him the most.
Well, first of all, Jen, thank you so much for having us on today. Certainly, although some time has passed, our thoughts and prayers go out to Mike's family, and to his loved ones. Certainly, this is something, Mike being relatively close in age, I really have a struggle understanding how his family has gotten through this. So again, just hopefully peace and prayers to his family. To kind of answer your question, certainly I've known Mike for a long time. He started at the county when I'm still at the county. He was at the county a number of years ago. So I got to know Mike just in terms of being colleagues of county employees. And he always he was always very, it was very apparent that he was a consummate professional, a partner when something needed to be done through his department that involved ours. I could always count on Mike to take the lead and address whatever is needed. From as he had kind of grown into his public official realm, certainly Mike was again a partner. At the county level, being the departments that I'm involved with, we have to have partnership with our state delegation, and Mike was again just took that professionalism to a higher level. And so certainly worked on a lot of different projects and programs in the county that not only he always recognized, not only impact to his district, but really recognized the importance to the county as well as the Commonwealth.
And Jim, that's your focus. I mean, that's your job. That's what you're paid to do. And having that relationship with legislators is extremely important. So tell us about your interactions with Mike Reese and what you'll miss the most.
Well, thanks, Jen. And like Jason, I'd really like to send my best wishes out to the family. My thoughts and prayers have certainly been with them from the beginning. Like Jason, I've known Mike for a very, very long time. One of the things that always struck me about him was his integrity. With Mike, you always got exactly what you saw. There was no facade. There was no games. There was no equivocation. If he felt something one way about an issue, he would tell you, I'm not going to do that, Jim, because this is what I believe in. And that's just such a rare thing these days to get from anybody, let alone somebody in an elected office. But he was a man of the people, right? Mike's focus was always on his constituency. I know that Jason has had a lot of experience with him on other projects, but I'll just note one. As we worked with him on the Laurel Connector, his concern was always, first and foremost, what impact is this going to have to the people in my district? Mm-hmm. Both good and bad, right? So seeing that and have him thinking about that and working through that, that's just not something that you get from most elected officials, that level of concern. So he's going to be greatly missed. I think everybody was looking for him to be around in that capacity, helping the county for a very, very long time, and he's going to leave some enormous shoes to fill.
Jason Rigoni from the Westmoreland County Industrial Development Corporation and Planning and Development Department, and Jim Smith from the Economic Growth Connection. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your memories about State Representative Mike Reese. You're listening to WHJB and Westmoreland Community Connections.
This is Westmoreland Community Connections on Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB. If you have a suggestion for a topic, or if your nonprofit organization would like to be featured on this program, call us during regular business hours at 724-216-1200.
Westmoreland Community Connections is a presentation of Citizens Fiber.
Welcome back to Westmoreland Community Connections on WHJB. I'm your host, Jennifer Miele. A somber topic today, but an important one dedicated to the memory of State Representative Mike Reese, who passed away much too young earlier this year. On the call with me today, recording their memories about State Representative Mike Reese, are Jordan Fry, a longtime confidant of Representative Reese, who worked side by side with him in both communications and policy. Senator Pat Stefano is on the line too, Commissioner Gina Cerilli, and most recently, we've been talking with Representative Eric Nelson. So Representative Nelson, tell us about your interactions with Mike Reese and what it was like to work with him out in Harrisburg and back at home, and tell us some of your memories.
Well, Mike was he was such a great guy, and we sat beside each other on the floor for 5 years. So every day we would be bantering back and forth because Mike was somebody who enjoyed to both motivate others through shame and promote himself as he promoted everyone else. So just the adjectives that he would be able to use and the fun that we had, because at times Harrisburg isn't the most fun environment. And it really helped to make, the role that we had because, controversial things would be coming up on the floor and we'd be reaching out to constituents that would be impacted by these bills as the debate would rage. And then one of us would shoot the other. Just a scorching insult about whatever it was at the time. Mike was a big flannel wearing guy, and I'm a big supporter of lapels, the clother here in Greensburg. And whether it was from clothes to coffee we just had so much fun. And we also shared an enormous amount of memories, because Mike was so connected to family and community. So we were both coaches, and we'd be looking at videos, and he'd say, "Hey, let me show you this." And here's a picture of a softball hit or a motorcycle going up the hill as Michael was working on learning his jumps. And both of us would be scrolling through the Disney app that Mike would always be wanting to, we'd be arguing over our favorite rides and what park was better. And I loved those huge turkey legs that he would say we just had a ton of fun in a number of different directions. And it wasn't just about the policies being passed, but it was about the people connected with those policies that I think really made Mike such a special guy.
Now, Mike Reese was 42 years old. He was a Republican. He served in the House of Representatives from 2009 until his death earlier this year. Secretary of the Pennsylvania House Republican Caucus for this most recent session, had been elected to serve caucus chairman, and then passed away earlier this year of a suspected brain aneurysm. So I'm going to ask you, and I'd like to ask everyone who is on this call, what kind of vacancy, what kind of vacuum does that leave for our community and for Pennsylvania? And how do you explain that to people? What kind of hole is there? And I'll start with you, Representative Nelson, since you're already unmuted.
Well, I'll be real quick. I think high expectations, which is something that Mike liked to hold everyone to, and I think some of the impact that he was able to have, not just in Westmoreland County, but across the state. I think it sets the bar for all of us to be able to work together, to be respectful, to fully engage, and to remember that we are here to represent all the people of Pennsylvania. And I think those are the key tenets of Mike, and what really I think the people of his district are going to be looking for, as they move forward. I really appreciate it, Jen. Thanks a lot for letting me participate today.
Jordan Fry, Jordan, you worked with him for a long time. What's the vacuum? What's the hole that's left for the community?
There's a matter of civility that I know that Mike always brought to the table. That is those are going to be big shoes to fill. In a lot of ways, our world is as divided now as it ever has been in political theory and just in the way that we handle ourselves. Mike never fell into that trap. He never allowed us, meaning his staff, to fall into that trap. And unfortunately, it's probably going to get worse before it gets better in the rest of the world. It's going to be very important that our community leaders work through issues and work with on communications in order to not fall down those rabbit holes.
Yes. So we're hearing about accountability. We're hearing about civility. Senator Stefano is still on with us today. What would you say about the hole and the vacancy left for our community with this death?
Well, as was previously mentioned, there will be a large gap because he was a great communicator, a very hard worker, and he believed in what he and I shared the same philosophy in listening first and then talking less. And yes, there will be a hole to fill, but if I know Mike, he's going to say all of us are replaceable and there will be someone to follow behind him. It's just, we ask that they follow in his footsteps and be that communicator, be transparent, and listen to everyone. And it will be, as Jordan had said, large shoes to fill. But I have faith that that next person has an excellent role model to guide their path forward.
And what a challenge for his family. Jordan, tell us about his family, his wife, and I believe 3 children. Is that right?
That's correct. Jen. Wife, 3 children. Claire is 10, Michael is 13, and Addison is 15. All into athletics except for Claire, who she's a cheerleader, a little bit more of a showbiz individual.
That's tremendous, and I'm sure they're going to need the support of their faith community at this hour, at this time, to get them through all of this. How are things now at a state level? I see if you visit the website for the legislative district, the offices are still open. You're still all working together on behalf of the constituents. Is that right?
That's correct. Our offices are open. We're handling our constituent workload. If you email, you'll want to email one of our staff members, but it's probably going to be better to call because most of our email addresses, though they could probably be found on a Google search, just call the office and we'll be able to help work through issues.
Now, just one more question as we wrap things up today. What do you think will be the torch that needs to be carried? What do you think one of his major 1 or 2 priorities were, Jordan, as he was rising through the leadership ranks of the party? What do you see that's going to need to be continued on his behalf?
There are many, but if I could narrow it down to 1 or 2, the dedication to working through education issues is really, really important. He had a history of bringing all the stakeholder groups together, and in doing so, that brought all of our students and their interests together because Pennsylvania is such a diverse state. A student in Philadelphia and in Pittsburgh sees the world maybe a lot differently than a student in North Star or even Ligonier. And the needs of their school are different. So Mike had a tendency to bring all their interests together at one table. And then the other part is simple fiscal responsibility and making certain that that government is spending responsibly and is accountable to its residents.
So Representative Nelson, I'm sure you'll be working on some of those exact issues in the coming weeks and months.
Yes, Mike was a big education guy, and he was an education for all person. He wasn't necessarily a big passer of bills. He was an outstanding builder of bridges. And Mike really helped to draw together at times what are some pretty contentious groups, powerful lobby groups that really don't want to work together. And Mike did an excellent job of trying to put children and their opportunities and educational opportunities first, and I will and have already, engaged in that space as we work together on a number of different issues related and associated with schools. And, we're going to keep that torch burning.
And Senator Stefano, the other side of the Capitol there in the state Senate, but I'm sure the same issues that Mike was passionate about. Most legislators are, no matter what house they sit in.
Yeah, absolutely. And being from the same area as Mike, our constituents all have the same basic requirements. They just expect a lot of their government to be fiscally responsible, just like Representative Nelson had mentioned that Mike worked on a lot. That's all of our same goals. And we have much work to do in the field of education. We will continue to carry that torch for Mike.
I want to thank all of you who joined this broadcast today to talk about State Representative Mike Reese. We had Jordan Fry, a longtime confidant of Representative Mike Reese, who worked on communications and policy issues and continues to hold down the fort in Harrisburg. I want to thank Senator Pat Stefano for being on the call today, Representative Eric Nelson, Westmoreland County Commissioner Gina Cerilli. You all are wonderful. Thank you. I know you're so busy, but this is so worth it. And the people in the community need to know what a wonderful guy he was and how very much he will be missed in Westmoreland County and across the state. Thank you again for joining us. You're listening to Westmoreland Community Connections on WHJB.
This has been Westmoreland Community Connections, a look at issues and happenings in and around Westmoreland County. Join us again next week on Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB.
Westmoreland Community Connections is a presentation of Citizens Fiber.